The arrangement. Olivia Reed's fingers trembled as she signed the last page of the contract. The fluorescent lights of the conference room seemed to buzz louder in her ears as Marcus Westfield, Boston's most ruthless CEO. And now, inexplicably, her soon-to-be husband watched with impassive gray eyes. "Is that all?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "Just the marriage certificate tomorrow at City Hall," Marcus replied, his deep voice betraying no emotion. "My lawyer will handle the media announcement. I expect you to move your things to my penthouse by Friday." Olivia nodded, still unable to believe the turn her life had taken. Just 3 weeks ago, she'd been focused on helping her mother run their neighborhood community center. Then came the notice the building had been purchased by Westfield Enterprises for redevelopment. Her mother, already battling cancer, couldn't bear losing the center she'd built from nothing. In desperation, Olivia had requested a meeting with the infamous Marcus Westfield himself. "Your proposal is unusual," he had said when she finished, pleading her case, but perhaps mutually beneficial. His counteroffer had been simple, yet staggering. A marriage of convenience. 1 year, as his wife attending functions, creating the appearance of domestic stability, and in return, her mother's community center would not only be saved, but funded for the next decade. "The board believes I need to soften my image," he had explained clinically. "A wife devoted to charitable work would be ideal." Olivia studied him now as he methodically organized the signed documents. At 35, Marcus Westfield was undeniably handsome, tall, and broad-shouldered with sharp features and dark hair silvering at the temples. But his eyes remained cold, distant. She had never seen him smile genuinely, not once during their negotiations. "There are conditions," he continued, sliding a folder toward her. "No romantic entanglements with others during our arrangement. Discretion is paramount. Your personal space in the penthouse will be yours alone. I will not intrude. Likewise, my private quarters and office are off limits." "So we'll be roommates pretending to be in love," Olivia summarized, trying to process the reality of what she'd agreed to. "In public only," Marcus corrected. "At home we need not pretend anything." The following morning brought rain and a perfunctory ceremony at City Hall. No guests, no celebration, just signatures and a brief, mechanical kiss. For the benefit of the clerk, Marcus's assistant Vivian, who had witnessed the proceedings, handed Olivia a small velvet box containing a diamond ring that felt impossibly heavy on her finger. Her mother had cried when Olivia explained the arrangement, partly from relief about the center, partly from concern for her daughter. "You can't sell yourself like this," she had protested. "It's just a year, Mom," Olivia had reassured her. "And it's not like I'm giving up anything. My work at the center continues. This is just ... business." By evening, Olivia stood in the foyer of Marcus's penthouse apartment, surrounded by her modest belongings. The space was immaculate, clean lines, chrome, and glass, with spectacular views of the city skyline. It's beautiful but sterile, much like its owner. "Your room is the second door on the right," Marcus said, loosening his tie as he stepped out of the elevator. "The housekeeper comes Mondays and Thursdays. Breakfast is at 7. We have the Donovan Foundation dinner this Saturday. Wear something appropriate." And with that, he disappeared down the hallway, leaving Olivia alone in the cavernous living room, wondering what exactly she had gotten herself into on, how she would survive a year, married to a man whose heart seemed permanently frozen. Part 2. Parallel lives 2 months into their arrangement. Olivia had mastered the art of sharing a home without truly sharing a life. The Westfield penthouse had become a sophisticated stage where two strangers performed a carefully choreographed dance of avoidance. Mornings followed a precise routine. Olivia would emerge from her room at 6:55 a.m. to find coffee already brewed. Marcus scanning financial reports at the kitchen island. Their breakfast conversations rarely ventured beyond weather forecasts or upcoming social obligations. By 7:30 he would be gone. The soft click of the elevator doors, the only evidence of his departure. "You have the Henderson Gala tonight, Marcus?" reminded her one Tuesday morning, not looking up from his tablet. "The car will collect you at 7. Olivia nodded, stirring her tea. "I've prepared remarks about the community center's new literacy program," Should I mention Westfield Enterprises' involvement? Of course, that's the point, he replied, his tone suggesting she'd asked something painfully obvious. These public appearances had become Olivia's primary job. She'd stand beside Marcus, her arm linked with his, smiling warmly while he discussed business with potential investors. To outsiders, they appeared the perfect power couple, the ruthless but brilliant CEO and his compassionate, community-minded wife. "Marcus seems different with you," commented Natalie Blackwood, the wife of a board member, during one such event. "Less intimidating." Olivia had nearly choked on her champagne. If only Natalie could see Marcus at home where he moved through rooms like a ghost, retreating to his office for hours, emerging only to take calls in languages Olivia didn't understand. The community center remained her sanctuary. They're surrounded by after-school programs and senior art classes. Olivia could almost forget her strange domestic situation. Her mother's health had improved with less stress and better treatment options. The one genuine bright spot in this bizarre arrangement. "You seem distracted today," her mother observed one afternoon as they sorted donated books. "Trouble in paradise?" Olivia forced a laugh. "There is no paradise to have trouble in, Mom. We barely interact. And yet you're wearing his grandmother's emerald bracelet," her mother noted, nodding toward Olivia's wrist. The jewelry had appeared on her dresser that morning with a note in Marcus's precise handwriting. "For tonight's charity auction, the emeralds complement your eyes." Not a compliment, merely a strategic aesthetic observation. On rare evenings when both were home, Olivia would curl up in the window seat of the living room with a book, while Marcus worked silently at his desk across the vast space. Sometimes she would feel his eyes on her, but whenever she looked up, his attention was firmly fixed on his work. One night, a violent thunderstorm rattled the windows of the penthouse. Unable to sleep, Olivia wandered into the kitchen for tea, surprised to find Marcus standing at the wall of windows watching lightning split the sky. "Sorry," she murmured, turning to leave. "You needn't go," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. For a moment, something almost vulnerable crossed his face. "I've always found thunderstorms compelling." For 5 precious minutes, they stood in silence, watching the storm together. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the moment of connection vanished. Marcus nodded curtly and disappeared back to his room. The next day, he left for a 2-week business trip to Singapore without saying goodbye. While he was away, Olivia noticed small details about the penthouse she'd overlooked before. A worn paperback of Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea on his nightstand, visible through his half-open door. A collection of vintage vinyl records hidden in a cabinet. A framed photograph tucked behind books on a shelf showing a teenage Marcus with an older man near a lighthouse, both actually smiling. These glimpses into the human behind the corporate mask intrigued her more than she cared to admit. The Marcus Westfield presented to the world calculating, unemotional, driven solely by profits, seemed increasingly at odds with these small evidences of sentiment. When he returned from Singapore, something subtle had shifted. He brought her a delicate jade pendant to match the decor for the Wilson wedding. But the way his fingers had lingered briefly when he handed her the box suggested there might be more to the gesture one evening. Passing his office, she heard him speaking sharply on the phone. "I don't care about the cost," he was saying, his voice tense. "Find the best specialist available." "Money is no object where this is concerned." Olivia hurried past, not wanting to eavesdrop, but the intensity in his usually controlled voice stayed. With her, who was sick, what was he keeping hidden behind those steel-gray eyes and perfectly tailored suits? Despite her determination to maintain emotional distance, Olivia found herself increasingly drawn to the mystery of Marcus Westfield and increasingly unsettled by the realization that their carefully separated lives were beginning to intertwine in ways neither of them had anticipated. The night everything changed, the Autumn Charity Gala for Children's Medical Research was the most prestigious event of Boston's social season. Hosted at the historic Bradbury Hotel, it drew the city's elite in their finest attire. For 5 hours, Olivia performed her role flawlessly, charming potential donors, graciously accepting compliments on her midnight blue gown, and standing proudly beside Marcus as he presented Westfield Enterprises' substantial donation. "You were remarkable tonight," Marcus commented as their driver navigated through the rain-slicked streets toward home. "The Prescotts have agreed to match our contribution." Olivia nodded, too exhausted for conversation. These events drained her. The constant smiling, the strategic small talk, the pressure to represent the Westfield name perfectly. She leaned her head against the cool window, watching raindrops race down the glass. "Are you unwell?" Marcus asked, his brow furrowing slightly. "Just tired," she replied, surprised by his concern. The car slowed unexpectedly, the driver cursing under his breath. "Traffic accident ahead, sir. Police have blocked the main route. We'll need to detour through Harborview." Marcus stiffened visibly. "Take another route." "There isn't one available, sir." "Not without adding an hour or two," I said. "Take another." "Route," Marcus interrupted, his voice suddenly sharp with an emotion Olivia couldn't identify. The driver glanced nervously in the rearview mirror. "Yes, sir. I'll try." But the police officer directing traffic was insistent, waving them toward the Harborview district. As they drove along the waterfront, Marcus grew increasingly tense, his knuckles white where he gripped his knee. Olivia watched him curiously. In 6 months of marriage, she had never seen him lose his composure, not during hostile negotiations. Not when a rival company poached his top engineer, not even when a waiter had spilled wine on his custom suit at a dinner party. "Marcus," she ventured softly. He didn't respond, his gaze fixed on something outside the window. Following his line of sight, Olivia saw a small memorial park with a bronze statue of a child. The car crawled past in the heavy traffic, but Marcus's eyes never left the park until it disappeared from view. At home, instead of retreating to his office as usual, Marcus went directly to the bar and poured himself a generous whiskey. His hands trembled slightly, another first in Olivia's experience. "Good night," she said quietly, moving toward her room. "Wait." The word seemed to escape him involuntarily. He stared at his glass for a long moment. "Would you sit with me? Just for a while?" Surprised, Olivia nodded and settled onto the sofa. Marcus remained standing, looking out at the city lights. "Today is November 12th, he said finally, his voice barely audible. 15 years ago today, I killed my best friend." The statement hung in the air between them. Olivia sat perfectly still, afraid that any movement might break this unexpected moment of vulnerability. "His name was Thomas," Marcus continued after draining his glass. "We grew up together in Harborview before it was redeveloped, inseparable since kindergarten." He moved to a cabinet Olivia had never seen him open, retrieving an old wooden box. From it, he withdrew a rain-damaged photograph. 2 teenage boys with fishing rods, laughing by the harbor. "We were 18. I had just received my acceptance to Harvard Business School. Thomas, ... double quotes, his voice faltered. Thomas had been accepted to the Art Institute of Chicago. We were celebrating." Marcus poured another whiskey, his movements mechanical. "I was driving too fast, showing off my father's new car. It was raining like tonight." He closed his eyes briefly. "The truck came out of nowhere, or perhaps I was simply not paying attention. When I woke up in the hospital 3 days later, Thomas was gone." Olivia felt her throat tighten. "Marcus, I'm so sorry. His family never blamed me. They should have." The raw pain in his voice was startling. "The memorial park we passed, I funded it 5 years ago. The statue was created from one of Thomas's own sculptures." He sat heavily beside her, the photograph trembling in his hands. "My father told me I needed to man up, focus on business school, move forward. Emotions are liabilities in business," he said. "I've lived by that philosophy ever since." Without thinking, Olivia reached for his hand. To her surprise, he didn't pull away. "Every November 12th, I visit the memorial. Except tonight, I couldn't bear it." Understanding dawned on Olivia. The urgent phone call she'd overheard weeks ago, Marcus had been arranging for the specialist art conservator needed to restore Thomas's deteriorating sculpture in the park. "Is that why you agreed to our arrangement?" she asked gently. "A business approach to marriage, no? Emotional complications?" Marcus met her eyes, his own revealing a depth of feeling she'd never seen before. "My father built Westfield Enterprises by being ruthless. I've spent 15 years perfecting that inheritance. But lately, ... double quotes. He hesitated.
How lately?
I've wondered what Thomas would think of the man I've become. That night, something fundamental shifted between them. As rain lashed against the windows, Olivia shared stories of her own loss as her father's death when she was 12. Her struggle to help her mother keep the community center alive. For the first time, they spoke as equals, as two people carrying private burdens. When Olivia finally rose to go to bed, Marcus called her name softly. "Thank you," he said simply, "for listening." She nodded, sensing that whatever came next their strange marriage would be different from everything that had come before. Breaking barriers the morning after Marcus's revelation, Olivia expected awkwardness, perhaps even regret or withdrawal. Instead, she found him in the kitchen making pancakes, something she hadn't known he could do. "My mother's recipe," he explained, answering her unasked question. Before she left, he hesitated, spatula in hand. "Would you like some?" This small domestic offering, so ordinary yet so unexpected, marked the beginning of a gradual transformation. The rigid boundaries they had established began to soften, not dramatically, but in subtle ways that accumulated like snowflakes, changing the landscape of their relationship almost imperceptibly until the change could no longer be denied. Olivia started leaving cups of tea outside his office during late-night work sessions. Marcus began asking about her day at the community center, showing genuine interest in the literacy program she'd developed. Their silences grew comfortable rather than strained. One Sunday morning, Olivia was struggling with the center's quarterly budget spreadsheet when Marcus appeared beside her. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to her laptop. For 2 hours, they worked side by side, his expertise transforming her chaotic numbers into a clear financial strategy. What surprised her most wasn't his skill, she had expected that, but his patience. In explaining each step, "You could have been a teacher in another life," she observed. Something almost like a smile touched his lips. "Thomas used to say the same thing, claimed I explained calculus better than our high school teacher." It was the first time he had mentioned Thomas without pain overshadowing his voice. The following week, Olivia found a small package on her dresser, a beautiful fountain pen, with a note for your program planning. "The ideas you shared yesterday deserve to be written with something substantial." She began leaving her own small gifts for him. Vintage records she'd found at a thrift store by a jazz musician he'd mentioned liking. Bookmarks made by the children at the center. Once daringly, a photo of himself speaking at a career day she'd organized, surrounded by attentive teenagers. Proof that he could connect with people when he allowed himself to try. When December arrived, Olivia hesitantly asked if they might decorate for the holidays. "I haven't bothered with Christmas decorations in years," Marcus admitted. "Then it's overdue," she replied, challenging him with a smile that would have been unthinkable months before. To her astonishment, he not only agreed, but accompanied her to select a tree. Watching Marcus Westfield, feared corporate titan deliberating seriously over evergreens at a local farm was a sight Olivia knew she would treasure. That evening, as they hung ornaments in the previously sterile living room, Marcus paused, holding a glass star. "Thomas and I had a competition every year who could make the ugliest ornament," said, the memory bringing warmth to his eyes. "His mother still has the collection. We should invite her for dinner," Olivia suggested impulsively. The old Marcus would have dismissed the idea immediately. This Marcus considered it, then nodded. "She'd like that. And she'd like you." The dinner with Eleanor Franklin the following week revealed another side of Marcus. With Thomas's mother, he was gentle, attentive, almost son-like. Eleanor brought photos Olivia had never seen Marcus and Thomas building a treehouse. At their high school graduation, fishing off the pier, "He carries too much guilt," Eleanor confided to Olivia while Marcus took a business call. The accident wasn't his fault. The truck driver ran a red light. But Marcus never forgave himself. She patted Olivia's hand. "You're good for him." "I see light in his eyes again." Comment lingered with Olivia long after Eleanor left. Was she good for her? Marcus, and more troublingly, was he becoming important to her in ways that would make their eventual separation painful? Their contract had stipulated a business arrangement, but business had never felt like this, like finding Marcus asleep at his desk and gently draping a blanket over his shoulders. Like the warm satisfaction she felt when he actually laughed. At her terrible joke during a charity dinner, like the unexpected flutter in her chest when their hands accidentally touched, reaching for the same wine glass. One evening in January, a pipe burst in the community center during a freezing spell. Olivia received the call at midnight and rushed to assess the damage. To her shock, Marcus insisted on coming with her in the flooded building. He removed his expensive shoes and rolled up his sleeves without comment, working alongside emergency plumbers and volunteers until dawn. When the immediate crisis was contained, he pulled Olivia aside. "I'll have my team handle the repairs." "No arguments," he added when she began to protest. "This place matters to you, so it matters to me." Simple statement, delivered matter-of-factly, nearly undid her. She found herself fighting tears as she thanked him. Later that week, reviewing the repair estimates in his home office, other boundary crossed. Olivia noticed a calendar on his desk. Contract end date was circled in red, now just 3 months away. "Marcus," she began hesitantly, "have you thought about what happens when our arrangement ends?" He looked up, his expression unreadable. "I have. And I think perhaps we should discuss our options," he said carefully. "Things have changed since we signed those papers." "Have they?" she asked, needing to hear him acknowledge what they. Both felt. Marcus set down his pen and met her gaze directly. "You know they have, Olivia?" That night, for the first time, they shared dinner at their own table rather than at some function or galage, as the two of them, talking about books and childhood memories and hopes. No business, no pretense, no audience. As winter began yielding to early spring, Olivia realized with growing clarity that what had begun as an arrangement of convenience had evolved into something neither of them anticipated, something genuine, fragile and frightening in its implications. The walls they had built to protect themselves were crumbling, leaving them vulnerable in ways the contract had never accounted for, and the clock was ticking toward a decision neither of them seemed ready to make. Beyond the contract, April arrived with unexpected warmth, coaxing Boston's cherry trees into premature bloom. As pink petals drifted across the city, Olivia found herself standing in Marcus's office, staring at the contract that had brought them together nearly a year before. 2 weeks, she said softly. "The agreement ends in 2 weeks." Marcus nodded, his expression contemplative, as he gazed out at the harbor. The past 3 months had brought them closer than either had anticipated. Yet neither had directly addressed what would happen when their arrangement officially concluded. "The board meeting is tomorrow," he said, turning to face her.
Ow.
"They'll expect an announcement about our future." The weight of the moment pressed between them. For months they had navigated a delicate transition from contractual strangers to something undefinable, more than partners, not quite lovers, bound by something deeper than either had intended. "What do you want, Marcus?" Olivia asked, her voice steady, despite her racing heart. He gestured toward the leather chair across from his desk, the same chair where, a year ago, she had sat as a desperate stranger, pleading for her mother's community center. "When we made this arrangement," he began carefully, "I saw it as a strategic business decision. You needed financial security for the center. I needed to project stability to the board during a critical expansion phase." He paused. "I never expected." "Neither did I," she admitted, when he didn't continue. The intercom buzzed, interrupting the moment. "Mr. Westfield, the Richardson contract requires your immediate attention," his assistant's voice announced. Later, Vivian Marcus replied, not taking his eyes from Olivia's face. He rose and moved to the window, his silhouette framed against the skyline he'd helped reshape. "Last week, Thomas's mother called. She said something that stayed with me. She told me I've spent 15 years building an empire as penance for a tragedy that wasn't my fault." He turned back to Olivia, and that perhaps it's time I built something for myself instead. Before Olivia could respond, Marcus's phone rang. The board chairman, according to the display. With an apologetic glance, he answered, immediately drawn into a heated discussion about quarterly projections. Olivia slipped out, her thoughts in turmoil. What did she want? When she'd signed that contract, escape had been her only goal under a year, save the center, resume her life. She hadn't counted on growing to respect the man beneath the corporate armor, hadn't anticipated the growing ache she felt at the thought of moving out of the penthouse that had somehow become home. At the community center that afternoon, her mother found her staring blankly at a grant application. "You're a million miles away," Jane Reed observed, settling beside her daughter. "The contract ends in 2 weeks," Olivia confessed. "I don't know what happens next." Her mother studied her knowingly. "When you told me about this arrangement, I was terrified you were sacrificing your happiness. Never imagined you might find it instead." "Who said anything about happiness?" Olivia protested weakly. Jane smiled. "Your face does, every time you mention his name." That evening, Olivia returned to the penthouse to find it empty and usual for a Tuesday. On the kitchen counter sat a folded note in Marcus's precise handwriting. "Meet me at the Harbor Memorial Park, 7 p.m. The sky was deepening toward twilight when her car pulled up to the small park where Thomas's statue stood. Marcus waited on a bench, his usual impeccable suit replaced by casual slacks and a sweater she'd never seen before. "I've been thinking about contracts," he said as she sat beside him. "About their limitations." Olivia's pulse quickened. "Such as?" "They define obligations clearly, but they can't account for unexpected developments." He gestured toward the bronze figure. Thomas would have laughed at how businesslike I'd become. He used to say, "I approached everything as if it were a quarterly report to be analyzed." "Wasn't that part of your success?" Olivia asked gently. Marcus shook his head. "Success on paper, perhaps. I've realized something important this year." He turned to face her directly. "Contracts end, Olivia. Feelings don't conform to termination. Clauses." A cherry blossom drifted down, landing on his shoulder. She reached out instinctively to brush it away, her fingers lingering against the soft fabric. "The board expects an announcement," Marcus continued. "They assume we'll either announce a divorce or renew our arrangement. They're business people. They understand strategic relationships." "And what do you want to tell them?" Olivia asked, her throat tight. Marcus covered her hand with his own. "I want to tell them that the CEO they hired for his ruthless business acumen has discovered something more valuable than corporate acquisitions." He smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face. "I want to tell them that I've fallen in love with my wife, and that any future plans for Westfield Enterprises will include her not because of a contract, but because I cannot imagine my life without her." Olivia's breath caught. Marcus, ... "When you came into my office a year ago," he continued, "I thought I was acquiring an asset. Instead, I found the person who would help me remember who I was before I built walls around myself." His voice grew softer. "The question is, when our contract ends next week, do you want to leave? Or would you consider staying not as part of an arrangement, but because you choose to?" For a moment, Olivia was silent, memories flooding through her mind, the coldness of their early days, the gradual thawing, the unexpected moments of connection. She thought of the man who had held her mother's hand during her final radiation treatment, who had spent hours helping neighborhood children build a science project, who still carried guilt but was learning slowly to carry joy as well. "I think," she said finally, "that I'd like to negotiate new terms." Marcus raised an eyebrow, a hint of his old businesslike demeanor returning. "What did you have in mind?" "Something less transactional, more permanent." She leaned forward and kissed him softly, their first real kiss. Not for show, not for witnesses, but for themselves alone. Something based not on what we can do for each other, but on who we become together. As twilight deepened around them, Marcus drew her closer. Behind them, Thomas's statue stood witness to a different kind of contract being formed, one written not on paper with legal terminology, but in the silent language of second chances and unexpected love. 2 days later, the business world buzzed with the news that Marcus Westfield, once known as Boston's most ruthless CEO, had announced at the board meeting that he would be restructuring Westfield Enterprises to include a major philanthropic division to be headed by his wife, Olivia. Insiders noted that the famously stoic executive had smiled throughout the presentation, his hand rarely leaving his wife's. The contract that had brought them together was filed away. replaced by a different kind of promise, one that recognized that the most powerful connections aren't those forged in boardrooms over legal documents, but those built day by day through small kindnesses. And the courage to break down walls that no longer serve their purpose in the penthouse that had once felt so sterile. Marcus and Olivia began to build something neither had been looking for, but both had found: a life beyond the boundaries of business, where healing could happen and love could grow in the most unexpected of arrangements.